welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for tuning in for the Berlin Mobile Marketing and Growth Meetup today. It has been a very long time since we had the last meetup. I think, for everybody that has not been living under a stone for the last year, you know why. Super happy to have you here today for a digital version of the Mobile Marketing and Growth Meetup after all. And topic we will discuss today is how to advance with mobile growth strategies in 2021. And for this, we will look at a nice little framework that we came up with. Before we get to that, let me quickly get to the agenda. So first up, I will introduce you to the actual host of today. Then we will discuss a bit why or what other marketing frameworks do exist and why we thought you need yet another one. We'll talk about the Customlytics Marketing Master Map, which is the name of the framework, how to use it and how to apply it. And then in the end, very important, there's time for questions and answers, hopefully answers. So anytime when you feel like you can drop a question in the question field in Zoom, and we'll pick that up in the end and you can get your questions answered. Awesome. Then let's get to your host for today. So with me today is Peggy Anne. So big round, little round of applause. Thanks a lot for joining, and great to have you.
Great to have you, Christian. Of course, CEO, co-founder, Customlytics, brought us the meetup concept. And I'd like to call you, I used to call you when I knew you first, a man with a plan. Now I'm going to call you the man with the map, because that's what we're going to be talking about. That's what you're going to be known for. And I am really excited to hear about this. So why don't you bring us in? But, you know, you mentioned, interestingly enough, when we were starting in here, we had that slide going round and round, right? And it's the philosopher slide. Interestingly enough, little known fact, I have a degree in philosophy. So I studied philosophy and political science, actually. So you're here, you're not a great philosopher, it says, but I'm going to geek out just a little bit. If you could be a philosopher, which one would it be?
I guess actually none of the ones that we're making fun of here. Probably good old Immanuel Kant. Just to give him kudos for essentially coming up with an early version of the concept of common sense with the categorical imperatives. So probably Kant.
Okay, and common sense is a great segue, Christian, because that's what you're tapping here with your framework. So we've just want to dive into this, understand what it is and where it comes from.
Absolutely. And I think to even start off, I want to take you guys joining us here today from our nice meetup group a bit through the thinking process that we had when we were coming up with this framework, and why we think actually there was a need in the market for one, for yet another marketing framework. And I think for that I can talk you through existing marketing frameworks a bit, which a lot of you here in the Zoom will probably know or have heard of if you're working in marketing. And there are a couple of problems that all of them have, or different problems, but in the sum it's just a group of problems. So the biggest one is that we always found them to be not holistic in the sense that they would approach the customer lifecycle, the marketing lifecycle. So a lot of them, for example, end with the first transaction, and then that's it. So with the acquisition of a new user. Some of them actually only start with the acquisition of a new user, but the entire chain before that is missing. So that's a big problem. That's why we designed the Marketing Master Map to cover the whole funnel, from really awareness to this Uber fanboy stage that I don't know maybe Apple has achieved in one way or the other. The other obvious problem is that not all of them. I mean, some of them are very old, actually. Indeed, some of them are 100 years old, almost like our like some of the philosophers are even older. So not all of them are, let's say, still a good fit for modern age digital or even mobile marketing. And the last thing is that we found a lot of them just to be not very actionable, because I mean, if you look at them, some of them even just exist of like, well, single words on kind of what to do in a specific area, and that's what we try to fix, and that's what we set out to fix with the marketing master map.
Absolutely, it's more holistic, above all. So we talked about why we have your marketing framework. We want to go through it, of course, but also understand very much how'd you came up with yours.
Yeah. So and now I will do the big review here. Yeah. We're into funny gifts at Customlytics if you haven't noticed yet. Super happy to show you. This is the marketing master map. We look at all the details that are written in very small letters here. You see them in slightly bigger letters at a later point. So the way that we came up with this is that we saw and used all of the marketing frameworks that are around in this space in our client work. And Customlytics is, well, as most of you know, we do consulting and like project-based work around mobile marketing. So we've really tried to use the marketing frameworks that are in the market and kind of essentially we have tried to validate them in client projects to see how they work out. And we've learned, well, none of them really works out for us. And then we did this is how a lot of startup founder stories start. And then we did our own, because we figured out that there's actually none in the market that we really think is suitable. So we created the marketing master map, which is, well, first of all, it's holistic. So it's essentially, it has all the steps in the marketing lifecycle of a user. It's clear. Essentially, we have tried to map different aspects of marketing to the different steps in the marketing lifecycle. And it's I would say, a pretty clear guideline on what to do in which step, much more clearer than the more generic frameworks. And it's applicable. In the end, it tells you what you should be focusing on, what you should be looking at in the different stages of the customer lifecycle. And that leads us to the last point, which I didn't even mention, on why the other marketing frameworks kind of fall short, is that it's actually user-centric. So the main, the architecture of this, the main structure of this marketing framework is the user, are the steps in the user funnel, from, like I said, awareness to this fanboy advocacy state. And I think that's, if you look at companies that succeed in the space, and I'm not just thinking of the famous quote from Jeff Bezos here, that you have to be customer obsessed, but I think this is what companies have in common that kind of succeed, is that they are customer centric, and that's what we try to replicate with this framework, which very much is a result of our day-to-day client work in the mobile space, essentially.
What I also think is excellent is the color coding, so I understand the stages and I can see the evolution of the customer journey. I think that that's a very smart focus and an aspect of this. And we want to get into this a lot deeper. So you do take it in these sections that we'll get to in just a moment, but just overall, when I'm looking at the Customlytics Marketing Master Map, I also understand, or I believe what you're also showing here, Christian, is that it's not just stages, but you're actually closing the loop. So actually, if this was done, it'd be a 3D sort of model where I go from the green back to the pink and I keep going around in a circle. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the idea. And I think this is also why I think it helps to even visualize, even if you just look at the steps in the user funnel, so just the colorful stuff in the top, that already helps you in understanding what the different steps in the customer lifecycle are. Because I always had the feeling, from also working in companies, of course, in performance marketing or online marketing, that sometimes when you look at stuff for too long, or like a specific marketing channel for too long, you kind of tend to forget how the actual user flow looks like, and you're so focused on making this click-through rate 0.5% better, and making this I don't know, your Facebook carousel perform 2% better in conversion rate, that you kind of tend to forget that there's actually, a much bigger space and also many more people in the company that are working on the same goal actually, which is obviously bringing users to convert, bringing users to come back. That's,
so we zoom out for the
yeah.
journey. We zoom out for the journey. I'd like to zoom in now and understand, let's go through it, because it's exactly that, how to apply it. We see it holistically. Now let's break it down.
Absolutely. So for this, we will start with the customer journey that, like I said before, essentially gives the structure to the entire marketing master map. And this is like the zoomed in part of at the top. By the way, for everybody that's joining us for the meetup here today, you can of course also get your PDF or even a printed version of this on our website. So if you hit customlytics.com, in top right corner, there's a little button that takes you to a landing page where you can download this and either have it hanging in your office or in your home office, or you have a digital version of it. So this gives the customer journey that we see here gives a structure to the entire marketing master map. And I will go through the steps quickly so that we kind of have it set and we can kind of carry on. So it's 11 steps in total, and they can be grouped into 4 groups. And it's very much a kind of, especially in the beginning, kind of a evolutionary, or like it's an evolution process that the user has to go through. And then in the end, we have the steps like repetition, where a user will kind of then stay, or we even might we might even be able to develop them even further. But let's start at the beginning. The red / almost pink box, that's demand generation. Demand generation, as you know, is all about making people aware that your product even does exist, and creating interest into your product. So that starts on the very left with the actual awareness, where it's like, oh yeah, people realize your brand actually exists. Very often that's the kind of the first touch point with some advertising, like advertising material or like some online ad. And we get to the interest part, often happening in the same moment, but not necessarily. The interest part is what you have already achieved if the user is getting interested in what they saw in an ad, versus potentially they could also already drop off at this point, so they could not even make it from awareness to interest. But if you're doing a good job and the ad is interesting, or the product that is promoted is interesting, users will get to the interest stage where they are like, oh yeah, okay, I'm interested in this type of service or this specific product. I want to learn more about it. That leads on to the consideration phase. Like I said before, again, those 3 steps in the demand generation very often happen in the very same moment. So it's like user sees an ad and is kind of going through those 3 steps in a matter of seconds. Anyway, consideration is the last step in this demand generation part. There it's already the user trying to understand what the product could do for them, and they could already imagine buying this specific product or a product of this kind. So this is the point when you work with like this whole like non-factual based marketing with like, pretty people on the beach and they're using a product, and you're suggesting that if the user buys the product, then they could be just like the people on the beach. This is kind of this is the stage. After that, we move on to the conversion generation box. That's the blue one. Consists of 4 steps. Everything that happens in here is converting a user from just knowing that you exist and considering the product to actually making the first transaction. So the first transaction, so to say, is this the last blue box in the conversion generation department. Before that, the first one is actually evaluation. That's something that not all customers will do. It also depends heavily on the kind of product. But if you have a product that has some kind of competition in the market, and you have a user that actually is into comparing different products, then they will run this evaluation, where they will actually go there and, I don't know, I think cars is a good example. Everybody knows that there's not just one car manufacturer in the world. So evaluation is a typical thing that happens for a purchase like a car, where a user would go there and try to understand, oh, what are the differences between the products? Which one is better? Which one is cheaper? Do I like the set of colors that I can get? So this is the evaluation phase. After that, we have the intent. With the intent, as the name implies, the intent of the user to actually buy either this exact product that he saw or a product of this kind is already growing to the point where they are like, oh yeah, I think I will actually want to buy this. But they would still be prone to competitors of yours sneaking in there, or like them learning that there's a competitor that might be better. So they're kind of sliding away from the initial brand they saw, but they are interested in this kind of product or service, and they have an intent to buy. Leading on to the decision phase, which is really this very last point, strong commitment. They are at the point where they're making a decision to buy the product or to not buy the product. If they buy the product, then that leads into the first action, which is, I think, self-explanatory. This is the first transaction. And the end of the blue box is where, like I said before, a lot of marketing frameworks end, but actually there's much more to come after this. Namely, there's the orange box, which is relationship management. Here it's all about upselling, monetizing, and increasing the activity and loyalty of the user. The first thing that you want is repetition. So it's like repeated purchases of the same product or of the same kind of product. In this step, a user would still be prone to also maybe looking at competitor products, knowing that he or she wants to have this kind of product, but not necessarily just from your brand. But he or she is making repeated purchases or is keeping the subscription if it's a subscription-based model. And that leads up to the loyalty phase, which is kind of similar to the repetition phase. The only difference being that at this point, a user would already be at the point where he or she would only buy your product. So not actively considering any more other products from the same kind of vertical. And that, in fact, leads us on to the very last box, which is the propagation box. And the propagation box, I think, we came up with this and we ran a lot of cycles internally to validate it also in client projects. This is always what I call the stage where user is making repeated purchases and is loyal to the brand and then also starts talking about it. And that department has two kind of separate stages that the user can be in. There's the referral stage, which is more transactional. This is essentially just saying, oh yeah, the user is talking about the product to like people, friends and family, and recommending your product. Very often, hence the name, very often this is part of a referral program that we see in companies. So there's an external incentive to refer the product or service. And then that's the final ultimate state that a user can possibly have is the advocacy. So the very last box. And advocacy is referral, but you don't even have to give the user an incentive anymore. So this is really this like, almost like a fanboy state. We will talk about what strategies you can employ to kind of get there, but it's like very hard to achieve. You have to have a very strong brand. You also have to have a very good product. It's impossible to achieve if the product is not good. It's like very few companies in the world have kind of gotten to this point where maybe Apple is one of the shining examples, and there are a few others. But yeah, this is really like the ultimate state of a user.
And speaking of ultimate, what you have here is not just the journey here, but I'd like you to just explain a little bit about this very interesting white and black line, because that's telling me a lot. It's saying that when I hit a certain point, the effort to get the customer to the next stage decreases proportionally. So if I'm doing my work at the top of the funnel, or at the beginning of the journey, it reduces. I think that's a fascinating point. I'd love you to clarify that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've put this to kind of illustrate a bit that the amount of efforts that you have to put into pure marketing in the sense of marketing a product to a target group is actually ever so much decreasing. And on the opposite side, for example, the user commitment is ever so much increasing. And I think that's interesting. That's interesting mechanics there, because also the now maybe you would now be asking yourself like, oh yeah, but I still have to work a lot to make a user loyal or to get the user to the advocacy state. Yes, but this work is not so much in marketing, actually. More parts of it, yes, but a lot of this is actually in product. So the product has to be great, the user experience has to be great, not so much on marketing. And that's kind of what we want to say here, is that all the beginning is all that hard, and then it kind of gets easier, at least from how much marketing efforts you have to put in. And at the same time, user commitment rises. At the same time, it shifts from extrinsic motivation of why users making a purchase to intrinsic motivation, and that's interesting. That's interesting mechanics, especially because you also, and I think there's a ton of examples from companies handing out all too many vouchers. You don't want to always have to incentivize users to make repeated purchases. Actually, you want to reach a state where they make this, without additional incentivization. And I think that's very interesting mechanic here.
Absolutely. So we talked about the marketing effort. Let's talk about the advertising as well.
Absolutely. As you can see here, we have then kind of mapped 4 additional categories to this user journey, and the next one that we can talk about is the advertising strategies. So very much mapped to all the steps that we discussed now. This is essentially telling somebody that looks at the marketing master map what kind of marketing messaging, I would even call it, what's the message of some advertising, and what kind of marketing messaging they have to use, or what aspect they have to focus on in a specific step in the marketing lifecycle of user to push them to the next step. That's kind of the idea. Little disclaimer here, it's kind of true for all the areas and even for the entire marketing master map, is that it's not complete. We, over time, I'm very much looking forward to how it will evolve and how we will add stuff. So this is just examples. There are more messaging types that you can use at specific types. This is more the most obvious, the most important ones to kind of get you into the groove of what you should be doing. Starting at the...
But this is your thinking. I'm just curious. We'll go through it step by step, but in a condensed form, this is your concept. What is the most surprising call to action or goal or step that maybe we weren't thinking about before that you have actually spelled out?
I don't know if it's so surprising, but it's probably actually the point. And also the box here for this part is not so big, but probably should be bigger. It's a point that I said before, how in the late steps of the marketing lifecycle, you actually at some point just need a good product. There's only so much that marketing can do, and yes, marketing can do a lot, but at some point the product just has to be there, especially after if you want to reach this loyalty and advocacy states. The product just has to be, and that, I think, maybe it's not really surprising, but it's more like it's the consistency that, like, we see this in essentially in all the client work we do, is that yes, there are things you can influence from the marketing perspective, but some you can't.
Makes good sense. So take us from the beginning, because that makes sense. If I'm going to be loyal to a brand or to a company, then I also have a good experience that's delivered or enabled by the product. But take me from awareness down.
Yeah, absolutely. So awareness, like I said, is the very early funnel stage, contact points, advertising, or like ads. Here it's about creating virality, which is easier said than done. But here it's like creating a buzz, creating something that sticks in mind with people. Can be annoying advertising, can be controversial advertising. This is the typical things we all know and have seen before. They all kind of, the goal that they all have is that they want to trigger strong emotions with the potential, the prospect, the potential customer, so that it makes you think about the ad, it makes you talk about the ad or this product. So this is what you want to focus on there. It's mysteries and buzz, like I said. This is in the very early stage, what you should do, and then we get to this whole like non-fact based marketing. where it's, let people dream, show them a perfect world, like what I said before. In moving on to consideration, there it's already getting more kind of rational, I would say, almost. Here it's about generating reputation. This is the point where it becomes interesting to use testimonials, celebrities, people that your audience can connect to make the point that, this is not just some random product that I see in this ad. This is actually something good. This is something that, like I said, has the social proof from some testimonial. Moving over to the first part in the conversion generation, which is this evaluation part. Now it's really about facts and really about USPs. Like I said, not all users are even doing this evaluation phase. There's also users that skip this entirely and just go ahead and buy the product. But for those who do, here you have to convince with USPs, you have to convince with facts and figures, but only really at that point. And that's maybe to give a real world example. What I see a lot is that for ads that are typically seen by people that have never heard anything about the brand before, so way here in the front, is that they use ads that already talk about the USPs at a point where users are just bored by this. They don't like, USPs is nice, but they don't even know that they need a new cellular contract. They don't even know that they need, I don't know, whatever. So this is a common error that I see, is kind of talking about this too early, or in some cases, it's not even something that you have to talk about at all. But if you do, then it has to be in this evaluation phase. Then we get to the intent. Here it's more, that only applies for some products. But if you can, this is the point where you can personalize your advertising very much to the customer. So this is like your average, well, as long as it's still possible, your average, I don't know, Facebook ad that you personalize towards, I don't know, if I'm selling gaming hardware, then this is the point where I'm like, really personalizing it to this target group, targeting them, and creating the ads in a way that they feel like, oh, like this is a company that really understands my needs. This is what you want to do in this intent phase. Leading on to the decision, which can either be based on just belief of the prospect that the product is good, or it can also be triggered by certain things that you can do. I think creating the fear of missing out is one of the more popular ones. This is like, we all know it in the form of artificially limiting the demand of a given product. Classic example of this, Apple was big at this at some point with their iPhones, and yeah, of course they couldn't produce more. Yeah, right. Also big surprise that they are selling a lot of them. So yeah, this is what you can do in the decision phase, and in the action phase. Yeah, it's just you need a clear call to action to kind of either get the app or sign up for a certain product. That's kind of the point there. When we get to the relationship management part, so the orange box, what you want to focus on is, of course, depending on the business model, it's either just keeping the user subscribed if it's some kind of subscription model, but even there, you might have some upselling opportunities. You might have some higher up the line products that you want to promote. This is what to focus on there. If it's a product that has to be purchased over and over again, then it's the repeated purchase, repeated sell there. And here, like I said before, it becomes super important that the product experience is good. So maybe worth considering here also doing something that seems obvious, but not all companies do, is actually asking the customer for feedback. Asking customer feedback, dividing it a bit between first-time customers because they might behave different to the mainstays. But that's what we want to do there. And then we get to the loyalty, which is, I think, pretty much self-explanatory. Here it's like, loyalty programs, we all know them. Trying to get a user to a point where he or she is only purchasing from you, not from other competitors, if that was a thing before. And I think referral is also pretty easy to explain. This is the part where you actively have to drive friend referral and just getting a user to refer to people that they know, very often incentivized with some refer a friend program where they get something out of it. And advocacy is interesting, probably one of the most interesting parts of the entire map. How do you create it? Well, it's very hard. Of course, first and foremost, the product at this point has to be awesome. You have to also, as a company, share a lot of the vision and mission behind what you're doing, creating a sense of unity, so that in order for a user to get to this point where they will just, without you even asking them for it, will just go around and talk about what a great experience they have with your product. It's hard to achieve. It's hard to achieve. It's almost this kind of cult state where the user thinks that, it's such a great thing that it's kind of their mission in life to, I know, exaggerate it now, but it's kind of their mission in life to tell others about it. And that's it's hard to achieve. Like I said, a couple of things you can do, but not trivial and impossible if the product experience itself is not great.
Just want to ping in on personalization again, because you bring up the point that it's an intent. By that time, you've had some interaction, you've had some experience, you have some data, and you understand my behavior. So you bring it in and it comes to its best point or its most applicable point in intent. But then I'm assuming it continues throughout, and it's like that intel inside in all the advertising from that point as well. Yeah,
it is absolutely. It is. So now that you say it, actually, we should probably extend the box or have the box reappear under the relationship management. Yes, because of course it is. You should. The big beauty of everything that's coming after the first transaction is that now all of a sudden you also have much richer data about the customer. You know what they've purchased. So everything that you do from this point onwards should be based on this information, or at least taking it into consideration, which maybe is so obvious that I didn't mention it before, but it's very important.
It's a part of it all, but it's interesting. It comes in there and then it continues. And of course, it's almost like full circle with the medium is the message, because we understand the goals. We understand what we want to be achieving at these points. And then, of course, the next step is we want to match it. We want to match it. And you've broken that down into channels, which I'd like to hear about next. And perhaps some myth busting as well about what works and what doesn't.
Absolutely. Great, which I think, I'm looking at the time. I will speed up.
And this is my favorite. I'd love you to ping in on this one, because this was the whole idea, the channels. I think a lot of marketers say, oh yes, it's a checklist, but we don't know. We shall see.
So I think the joke in this, and it's a very valid one actually, is that if your marketing didn't work on all those other channels that existed before, well, then it will probably also not work on Clubhouse or on that account any other new hyped marketing channel, because it's probably your messaging and your ads. So I think good vehicle to come to this.
Looking to see where you have Clubhouse here. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, in one way, it's there under social media, which is admittedly is a broad field. But what we're trying with this, and here I think it gets a bit. So before, I think it was all very neatly arranged and very it was very sharp, the distinctions. Here it gets a bit more floating. So what this says is essentially, okay, I have the steps in the marketing lifecycle of the user. That's all cool. I understand it. What kind of channels do I have to use, or should I be focusing on in order, again, to bring the user to the next step into in the lifecycle? And what this cannot even account for, because it has to follow the same visualization like the other chapters, is that some of these are more important than others. Some of these are really like hygiene factors that you shouldn't, like app store optimization, for example, what is kind of a big bar in here. Like you shouldn't, like, that's very important. If that's terrible and you scare people off in your app store appearance, well, you will have a very hard time converting anybody into even making the first purchase. So this cannot really even account for that, but it can give you an idea of what you should be maybe focusing on, or at least be considering for a channel to kind of use for marketing in the specific steps. Of course, again, this is a marketing framework that we try to make as broadly applicable as possible. So this should give you a hint, but if you have already learned that out of home is not working for you, then of course, that's cool. And that's also the basis of everything you should do, should be testing. But yeah, this is I think the common ground of what we have learned from client projects, of what kind of marketing channels are important or can work out very well in different stages of the marketing funnel. And also, very importantly, this gives you an idea of how the messaging should look like in the specific channel. So, for example, your TV advertising should on very different things from what you do later on once you have more customer information and once you send them like one-to-one communication. Very different messaging, even just between the steps from demand generation to conversion generation is very different. With TV, probably more focused on this like non-factual kind of showing the perfect world kind of thing, while then later on in paid search, which is a CA, he already got users searching for your service or some kind of keyword that's related to your service. So you should probably tell them different things than you told them in the TV advertising. So this is also what this wants to say, and I think this one is probably also too big for me to go through all of it. I think the only thing that I want to add is that there are some channels that are very clearly only suitable for early funnel stage, and there are some channels that are important for a kind of a bigger part of the user funnel, and there are some very like niche ones who are really only useful for a certain step, and that to some degree should also tell you a bit on how much efforts you should put into it. Like a channel that is important for so many steps in the marketing life cycle of a user is probably worth investing more efforts from your side in than one that's only really suitable for a small part of it. It doesn't mean it's not important. Depending on what you do, PR can be very important, but it's from a steps in the life cycle perspective, this is what we would at least suggest you to consider. I think the only other thing worth mentioning is that here you see very clearly how after this first transaction, and once you enter the relationship management part of it, how you can all of a sudden run or like use channels that you couldn't use before, because now you have either more information about the user or just more channels available, like the in-app notifications, which you will only have after user at least made this app install, if that's the action. So you will only have that available afterwards, and all of the other channels are much more useful by this time because you have more information about the user. Like I said, at this point, we will probably know what they have purchased already, and this can educate, way other campaigns like in the early stages.
Yeah, you can customize your campaigns. You have personalization. Yeah. And of course, you understand the channels, and we talked about that. Is there a channel that, I mean, they're all very important, and we said there are some at the beginning, some at the end, but in that mix, because this is a time where budgets are going to be stretched, and people are also asking me even, what channel can we drop? And it's interesting because there are quite a few that you cannot. You think you would, but there are a few. What would your pick be?
So I think the answer to that is actually quite simple. Maybe it is because this is actually a question that we get from clients. So if you're tight on budget, then the answer is always first do the things that don't even cost any money, or that cost, some one-off investment for, you hiring somebody doing it, or you hiring somebody internally doing it, but then there's no ongoing costs. Prime example of this is App Store optimization. App Store optimization is a topic that if you get it right once, then you're fine for like a significant amount of time with some small adaptations here and there. Yeah. And there's no ongoing costs to it like it is for paid advertising, for example. Okay. So rule of thumb is, if you're tight on budget, start with the channels that don't even cost a thing. ASO is a very easy and good example, but there are also others. You can also, be really good at social media without running paid ads. It's harder, of course, but it's possible. So this is what I would focus on. And if you then, with this tight budget, start looking into paid media channels, then our answer is always start with the mainstream channels. So if you're talking paid social, that's Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, maybe TikTok. Start with the mainstream channels because they will have the biggest amount of users available to see your ads, and hence you have the lowest price for your initial ads. And that's also, that's also the starting point of any paid strategy, really. If you're not doing any paid activities yet, then start with the mainstream channels. They have the most users, they have the most inventory, hence they are the cheapest in the beginning.
Okay, this is a very holistic view of the channels, of the strategy, the goals, again, mapped to that journey. It also brings together practically all of the parts of the organization. Can you tell me a little bit about how that is spread across the organization, marketing, engineering, CRM?
Absolutely. So in the second to last chapter of the Marketing Master Map, we have tried to map out, it's not so much even departments necessarily, just a good kind of summary. Actually, what we have tried to map out here is functions in a company. Very often in a smaller company, several of these functions can live within one person, realistically. What we've tried to map out here is that which kind of profession, which kind of function, like I said, should be involved in the marketing efforts in a specific stage of the marketing lifecycle. This maps pretty much to the channels that we looked at in a previous chapter. So most of the channels that are relevant here in the awareness, interest, consideration phase are typical brand marketing channels. So that's probably the department or function that will run them inside of the company. There's one function that you need all the time, that's business intelligence, just because you will always need data. Without data, you will not be able to even understand how a user is moving along in the different steps of the life cycle. And I think the rest is pretty obvious. I mean, brand marketing from this really not so much performance-based approach is what you want to have in the beginning to spark interest with the user. And then again, in the end, to get them to this point of advocacy where now I have to focus on the values of the company again to, create this almost cult-like scenario. There's performance marketing, which is relevant for the biggest parts of the life cycle. There's CRM, which kind of only really becomes relevant once you have the channels available to do CRM activities, which is, if it's an app, it's after the app install. Product is, it's a bit misleading even. Product has to be there all the time, but here it's more like, at which stage does the product really have to have the biggest influence on the step in the marketing lifecycle? And this is it. So everything from purchase and before, when you talk about the USPs and already the product. This is probably not how exactly the departments will be set up at a given company, but it's like, the functions that we always felt are needed to succeed in a specific part.
What's also very interesting is that you understand the functions that you probably need to have at the table when making decisions about marketing.
Absolutely.
Is that what you're seeing with your customers? and your clients, Christian, that they are reorganizing for this success, or?
It's what we tell them. No, I think, yeah, I think the companies that are not working with us and are successful, I think the ones who are following something like this. I think the sad reality is a bit that in actual companies in the real world, the distribution of which department does what is very often not dictated by how it would be useful, which is probably this, but it's more dictated by what is the most powerful, what is the most, the biggest sometimes even just, or what's the most powerful department. Good example is, again, App Store optimization. I mean, we've used it before as an example, why not use it again? App Store optimization, where does it live in the organization? Is it a marketing topic? So is it like in the performance marketing team or in the general marketing team? Is it a product topic? If the product team is strong, then it's almost always a product only topic. But product people are also typically not the greatest at marketing. So this is like, this is the struggle. This is the struggle. And that's why I think the more integrated the teams are, the better it is. And that's, I think, why it's very often a successful strategy for a startup in the beginning to have one person that has like 5 functions listed here, or like a couple of functions listed here, is because then, well, decision lines are very short and there's no fighting over who's doing the App Store screenshots. So yeah, I can back up this whole idea of having this very generalist first app marketing person in a company is definitely, yeah.
Absolutely. So we go from teamwork, and of course, teamwork works when you have the tools, and you also have that in the map, going through the technologies. And of course, this is where we get the non-existence of a silver bullet. There is not one.
Yeah, there we go again. This is the technologies department. So this is the part where we try to explain a bit what kind of technologies you need in the different steps of the marketing lifecycle. Here, even more prominent than before, there are some and this doesn't mean that you need all of them. It's again more this idea of, hey, should consider this or that for this specific part of the chain. Here, the message is more that if you choose to employ any of these, then a lot of them have to be present for the entire chain of the marketing lifecycle. So again, data warehousing, data visualization, you kind of need from the beginning, not necessarily data warehousing, but visualization, of course. It can live in some kind of tool in the beginning. It doesn't have to be self-built, but you need the data to understand what users are even doing. Same goes for a customer data platform. If you choose to employ one, attribution tracking is a good example. You need that from the point where you are running ads that could potentially lead the user to make an install. Well, that happens from the very first awareness kind of part. And I think, yeah, then some of them are mapped to when to use this kind of channel. I think ASO tool is a good example. You need that when you do ASO or when you focus a lot on ASO. Yeah, this is a bit a guideline or like a help to understand when in the channel, when in the funnel do I need which kind of technology. This is not even talking about how to connect them. We have other nice flowcharts about how to connect them. This is already complicated. But yeah, again, more on the draw some inspiration from it, understand when you will probably need what, and see it more as a, hey, this is the things to consider, than, hey, this is the things you must have, because, well, definitely no startup will have it. Bigger companies at some point might actually have a setup that's pretty complete and pretty much like shown here, but definitely not the average startup. And also, it does make sense for them to have it from the beginning, because setting something up like this is complicated, needs a lot of manpower and resources, and hence money.
Thinking of this and looking at it, we have gone through the entire journey. We've gone through all the segments. Now we're going to be holistic, Christian, and we put them back together and we say, I get this completely. And we've talked about how to apply the different parts, but if you look at it, we say, how do I apply it? And how do mobile marketers really benefit from applying this?
Absolutely. So I think, I mean, you know, we are marketing people, so I could go on for another hour talking about why it's great. But I think the two or three, even the three main points that we think that this is, like, you know, generally going to have an impact, or how it's going to be used to make an impact, is that number one, it's the first really, in the digital space, first really like holistic marketing framework, or even blueprint, to kind of understand how marketing should be set up. You can use it in any stage of the user life cycle. It doesn't end somewhere where it's kind of not supposed to be over. So it really helps you with all the spots. I think number two, it helps you identifying blind spots or areas where you are kind of missing out, didn't think about before. I think for this is probably the greatest I think reason why I think it's a great framework. I would have, like, in the time when I started in mobile marketing, which was in 2013 or so at Delivery Hero, I would have, like, 100%, I would have wished to have this thing on my wall in the office. That would have probably speeded up my learning process in the field by, a lot of time. Because I was, you know, when I was starting off, I was looking exactly for this. I was reading all the articles, and I was trying to, you know, I got the puzzle pieces, but it was impossible in the beginning to kind of, you know, put them together and understand. And also kind of when you are, I mean, by that time, tool vendors had already understood that Delivery Hero, you know, is a growing business and has some money. So, you know, if you're sitting in those sales calls all day, every tool vendor will come in and tell you how their solution is going to be the fix for all your problems. And it's very hard. It's very hard to understand, you know, what problems can actually be fixed by a CRM tool or by an attribution tracking tool, and which cannot. So yeah, I would definitely have wished for something like this that helps me kind of understanding how to put the piece together, and also to understand blind spots. And I think that leads on to the last part here, really, which is the validation part. A lot of, like, all the people that we speak to, I think, have to some degree, I mean, of course they have to some degree already made up their mind about what they want to do and how they think they should be approaching mobile marketing or digital marketing on that account. But validating this strategy with something like the Marketing Master Map is, I think, incredibly useful, and helps you really improving your marketing game.
Speaking of the blind spots and working with your clients, what do you think are the common blind spots now? Maybe even that marketers themselves don't realize.
Sometimes it's indeed the kind of the one channel that somebody hasn't been using before, and that would probably be a good idea to use, especially because the paid channels evolve so quickly. You know, TikTok and even Clubhouse, but you know, there's always new channels coming up, because the advertising is always where the attention of the user is, and that's changing over time. Facebook usage just going down in exchange, TikTok usage just going up, for example. And I think this is an important part. And if I would have to name a second one where I think people are missing out on, it's the data foundation. In a lot of cases, we talk to, and sometimes it's the fault of the organization or how the structure of the company is in the department. But very often I have the feeling that we speak to marketing people, and they have, you know, good ideas of what they want to try as additional channels, but they trust numbers that are often, you know, not checked, not verified that they're correct, and that can only lead to wrong assumptions. So yeah, stressing the point of how data integrity and checking that your data is correct can only be that's the only thing that can really help you making educated decisions in marketing. And realizing that data integrity is in almost every tracking setup or marketing tool setup a problem is an important starting point to this, because a lot of companies, a lot of people that we talk to don't think that's the case, and then they live in this kind of dream world where they trust some numbers that are just like not correct.
Yeah, we need a single source of truth. And speaking of truth, we're going to be telling it because we have Q&A coming up. I'm very conscious of the time, and I've seen some questions coming in there. Of course, I want to urge everyone to use the Q&A function in Zoom or chat it in. We'll look at them as well. I think you have some, Christian, in your dashboard. Did you want to start off?
Let me actually see. But yeah, using Zoom is yet another.
I have a couple advantage. In the meantime, if you want me to start off.
Yeah, please start.
Okay, so this is interesting, but it's actually hard. How can I make sure to always put my users first? So a first lesson in customer centricity and establishing that focus. Not a book, Christian.
I know, sorry, not a book, also not a movie again. I think sounds trivial, but a lot of people are not doing it. Step into the shoes of your own customers, and without any of the bias that you have from working in this company that you obviously work for, use the product. Really, like, when I say use the product, I really mean that as good as you can in the digital and like tracked world, try to act like a user that has never seen about the product before. Try to understand what kind of ads they're getting, because that's like, it's crazy, but like a lot of people that run paid ads, they don't really have an overview of what ads are around there, and they don't understand what a user sees in which part of the, again, marketing lifecycle. So start with that, try to understand what ads users are seeing. Sign up for the service, use the product. It's like, what's the nice saying that you always have for it? Eat your own dog food. Use your own product. It's like, it's crazy how insightful that is. It's like, and by the way, it's not just useful for marketing people, it's also useful for your product people. They also very often live in this, I don't know, crazy dream world where they can't understand how users are dropping off in user funnel. And then it takes you one app install and one registration flow to understand why users are dropping off. So yeah, use the product.
Absolutely.
Use the product.
That makes a lot of sense. And with the point around product, of course, you need to measure how people are interacting with the product. And we have a question that refers more to the department. So the way that the functions themselves need to come together. So how do I make sure everyone is aligned on shared KPIs? Is it weekly, monthly check-ins? What would you suggest? So a practical question as well as a theoretical.
It's a big problem. So thanks a lot for the question. It's a big problem. So good if we talk about it. What we have found to be successful to overcome this is, and it's like I said, it's incredibly important, because otherwise you have this scenario of different departments working towards different goals. And then at some point, if you have some sneaky people in there, they will even sabotage other departments to kind of help with their own metrics. The way to overcome this is to sit down and create essentially it's a flow chart. Typically we do it as part of a workshop. It's a flow chart, and make all the different departments understand that they pay towards one greater business goal, which if you're selling something is selling more of that, for example. And then kind of in a kind of waterfall scenario, understand which activities different departments should pursue to pay towards that goal, and how it breaks down. So if I have this purchase as the North Star kind of overarching most important metric, then a sub-metric of this in my marketing department is the conversion rate in the App Store, because that has an impact on how much purchase we can make. And all the departments have to understand this. And they also have to understand how there has to be alignment between the departments so that they are also not doing contradicting things, which we constantly see in companies. Getting them into a meeting, making them understand that this is the overarching business goal. What are the different things we do in the departments to pay towards that?
Okay. Time is running out, Christian, but maybe just a quick answer for a quick, straightforward question. One about churn, which is super important. We have a lot of, I'm reading about it constantly now. We have a sort of a low loyalty level. We're at home, we can spend a lot of time researching products and experiences, and it's a buyer's market. We're in control, the customers are in control. So at which point and which stage in the customer journey is churn the highest or the highest risk? And can you share some tips on how to prevent users from leaving my app?
So I would argue that churn already happens before a user is even making their way to the app. If you think about the touch points in the marketing lifecycle, churn happens already. And I was explaining one type of churn in the very beginning. Churn happens already after the first touch point with a brand, when a user sees an ad and is just not interested. First up, I would argue that churn happens in every stage of the funnel. But of course, there are certain points where we are just know it's like those neuralgic points where users are dropping off. And one of them is the app install for sure. How to tackle this? I think there are a lot of strategies, which I don't even want to go into detail too much because we don't have so much more time. I think from a macro level, churn only really happens when a user is reaching a point in the user funnel where his or her expectations are not met with whatever he or she sees in the product anymore. And this is the points you have to find. This can be, I don't know, if you think about apps, this can be this sudden and not so happy surprise of, oh, now I understand that this app is actually paid, because it was not, or like this feature of the app is paid with an in-app purchase because it was not communicated before. It's aligning customer expectations with the steps in your product, but also in your marketing. That's the generic answer to how to fix churn. Then, of course, there are a lot of sub strategies and all the different steps, but this is how I would put it.
Makes a lot of sense, though. I've heard that many times and spoken with app marketers that they say we need to be bolder and braver about when we say, for example, something's going to cost something. We need to be upfront about it. If we have a subscription app or subscription model of the app, we need to spell that out, and it has to be done early in the journey. And speaking of the journey, ours has come to the end for a moment, at least this time. Christian, plenty more to come. One of the questions was even how to print the map. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit more about the resources, where they're available, and where to get the map.
Absolutely. So like I said, you can just hit up our website. There's a dedicated landing page, which is customlytics.com/marketing-master-map. It's also, if you land on the homepage, it's a big button at the top right corner. There are videos where I explain in even greater detail than today what the different categories of the marketing map are about. You can get a free copy, like I said, either digital or even printed, so we will ship it out to you. It's highly recommended. I think it's really good to put into, like I said, either your home office or like physical office when that's a thing again. There are blog articles already out explaining more about the why and how and what the marketing map is all about. That's on our blog, and there's also more articles coming up for that. And then the last thing really is our newsletter, which you can also sign up through on the website, which will provide you with information not just about the Marketing Master Map, but also our general updates on, well, mobile, the industry, the state. Is Apple going to postpone the IDFA change yet again? Let's see. All of this you will find in the newsletter, so make sure you also sign up for that.
because we're supposed to have a stay of execution. I won't call it that, but I just did. So we shall see lots of resources all over at customlytics.com. It's been a delight, Christian. We will continue the conversation because shameless plug, you'll be showing up on my podcast soon over at Mobile Presence and many other opportunities to come. Thanks everyone for joining. And this has been recorded. So of course, look for segments of the video, look for more around the video, and look for more learning resources over at Customlytics. Thank you, Christian, for being my guest.
Thanks a lot, Peggy, for having us. And thanks for tuning in, everybody, for the meetup today. See you soon, stay safe, and we'll meet in person again someday.
Absolutely. Beers on me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.